All right, so welcome to actually our third part for texturing. This is part 2 of my stuff, and then we did Tony Bagsy's substance last lecture. How do you guys like that?
Music. Nice teacher.
Substance is a very good program. You guys will continue to get it. Anybody in game art, that's pretty much going to be where you live. Anybody in CA, you're probably going to still continue to use it, so I would keep doing tutorials. That's really kind of the way everything's going. You got a question?
No.
Okay. All right, so today we're going to be working with presence maps, which are basically opacity maps. They allow us to remove portions of geometry at render time. That way we can take the label that we're going to be applying to the bottle, if you're doing the exterior scene, and remove the unwanted parts of the label and just keep the basic shape of the label using an alpha channel. We're going to be doing projection mapping today. Projection mapping allows us to put decals, stickers in precise locations. Good thing about them is you change your mind, you can move it in Maya. You don't have to go back into Substance, back into Photoshop. You can move them around. Each project needs one projection in it, basically one. For the interior, it'll be the AAA logo on the thermos, and for the exterior, it'll be either your initials or the SAL logo on the table. If you want to do more, that's fine, you can. We're also going to be dealing with layered texturing in Maya. We dealt with layers in Photoshop, we dealt with layers in Substance. Today we're going to deal with layering in Maya. It's another kind of way to work, different workflow. A lot of Photoshop, a lot of Substance relies on you getting everything done in the app before you ship out all the parts to Maya. Whereas what you can do in Maya with layering is layer all your stuff like you would in either Photoshop or Substance, and then move it around if you need to. Downside of it is there are some limitations. Maya's layering system is a little on the ancient side, but still functional. Also, in order to do layering in Maya, we have to know what the common layering blend modes are. And there are really two major ones that we use and one minor. We're also going to, if we have time, we're going to get into displacements. Got a couple of utilities that are useful in Maya that allow you to either invert things or work on hue, saturation, and value so you can desaturate colors. Because a lot of times when you bring in textures right into Maya from the internet, the colors are usually super saturated. A lot more saturated than they would be or should be in the real world. So I've got a quick SAL layer texture reference doc for you guys. It's very simple. It allows you to basically have at a glance kind of compare Photoshop's layering to mine. All right, so I appreciate you guys bringing your artwork, but this is not art class, so please pay attention to what we're doing. Follow along. It's not time to sculpt. Okay, you wouldn't be doing SAL work when you're supposed to be sculpting or drawing an art. So let's keep this to just SAL. When you guys get in the lab, when you're rendering, great. You got nothing to do, go ahead, sculpt, work on your art, draw, whatever you need to do. Absolutely. But stay here with this class, please. Because we're going to be going over stuff that you need to use. All right, so office hours tomorrow going to be 10 to 4 in Discord, 10 to 12, 2 to 4 in my office, and then Frank will be doing the Friday go to training open lab optional from 1 to 5. So presence maps. This is how we're going to cut out the wine label for the bottle. As I mentioned, projection mapping, AAA logo, SAL logo. Layering in Maya, common blend modes, displacement maps, time permitting, the reverse utility, the remap, HSV, maybe even a little more seamless texturing in Photoshop. If we have time, we can always bump that to next time also. if we need to. All right, so alpha channels, opacity maps, they all do the same thing. In an alpha channel, anything that is white is opaque or kept. Anything that is black is removed or transparent. Same thing with an opacity map. They are exactly the same thing. All right, black and white are the two colors that we use. Now, you can use gray. Gray will basically feather something from either being opaque to transparent. But most of the time we are specifically removing parts that we don't want to show. Either some kind of background on a texture or piece of geometry that we don't want visible when we render. So here, simple black and white checker was used in the presence channel, which by coincidence is down in the global section where bump maps are. So you plug in a black and white map, something you can make in Photoshop, something that's pre-done, something you can make in Substance. All right? And when you render, it will remove anything that is black. And you can see that it actually does work. The shadow kind of confirms that the geometry has holes in it or is not visible. So global section, it's down 4 under the bump, actually 3 under the bump, but it's the fourth one down in global. And it is expecting scalar information, just black and white. Now the beauty of this is that we can embed an alpha channel or an opacity map in a file that has color information through the magic of the alpha channel or the 32-bit target image file format. So if you remember, RGB uses 24 bits, 3 channels. Right? Targas and most advanced file formats can handle 4 channels. Each channel has 8 bits, 8 times 4 is 32. That's how we get our extra channel in there. All right, so what I'm going to do is let's dismiss that. First off, let's take a look, and instead of me just demoing that checker pattern, let's actually find a texture that's usable. So I'm going to go in my favorite search engine and look for wine label. And don't forget, you want to make sure the size is larger than 1K. Now, the one thing you want to avoid when you are looking for labels, don't try to take it off of a file. It's a cylinder. It's going to be distorted. You're going to have to go into Photoshop and kind of play around with the perspective, the warp tool. It's not worth it. You also want to try to find a label that has a neutral background. It could be black, could be white, could be gray. Doesn't matter, as long as it's something we can select out and remove. Because we don't want any of that information around here. All we want is this label. So something like this might be useful, although it looks like it was a scan, maybe even a photo. It doesn't look like it's all that good. You want to try to find something very clear. Remember, your wine bottle's about 10 feet away from the camera. The camera, the wine bottle's on the table. It's going to be hard to read if it's kind of grainy and not very clear. Now, another thing to avoid, which I may or may not have to tell you, is anything with watermarks. like this, yes, you can make your own label as long as it's PG. No porn, no obscenities. I have to say that, yes, because it has been done. So producer name, you can, as long as you know what you're doing in Photoshop, you can probably clone that out if you wanted to. Although this kind of has like a watermark background in the label itself that wouldn't really make it a good candidate for trying to alter this, because they want you to buy it. So here's one, that's not too bad. Actual label. Cabernet Sauvignon. Anybody know wine? Is that red or white?
It's a red.
Red? Okay, thought so. So red wine, if you've got red wine, that's your label, or one of your labels you can use. In fact, I'll grab this one, because I think I stuck red wine when we were doing wine in the, when we did the glass lecture. Yeah, that'll work. Now, a couple other things I'm looking for is that there's enough of a white background, at least this one's got white, where it's not, the texture itself is not being cut off, which means the label itself. All right, so we're going to take this, or a label like this, into Photoshop, and we need to make sure we have enough of a white background so we can basically create an alpha channel around the entire label. I'm going to go see what else is around. Here's another one that might work. I got two label. Ooh. So sometimes some of the other suggestions are also good too. If you click on one label, you can sometimes find other things. That one's too small because it's 290 by 720. That one is a little better. It's not too bad. You really do want to make sure you have big enough label. All right, so these are my three choices here. This one, that one, or this one. I kind of lean towards this one because it's not a rectangle, it's not a square, it's got an interesting shape, yeah. Yeah, it does. Because you need to have space around the label so you can define what is transparent and what is kept. If it goes edge to edge, you would think to yourself, well, why wouldn't the alpha channel read correctly? But it's the way that it's handled when it's plugged into the map. If it doesn't have a border around it, it just considers that gone. So you really need to have it. And what I'm going to do is show you guys in Photoshop how to extend the background if your label is cropped right to the edge of the image. In fact, what I'll do is I'll do this one, and then I'll do this one to kind of show you. All right, so first thing I'm going to do, right click, open with Photoshop. You really can't do this in any other app. All right, so I got all three wine labels open here. That one, I'm not leaning towards that one too much. It's going to be, I'll do the others too, to get an idea. All right. So first thing I want to take a look at is, I'm going to zoom in on it. Kind of see what the quality's like on the edges. A bit soft on the edges, that's all right in some areas. It does go edge to edge, but I'm not comfortable with having that close to my edge. I really want to have a little more canvas in the back behind it. So the way you can do that is go under Image to Canvas Size. So canvas size gives you some options. For example, I've got a white background. If your label goes edge to edge, you can make your background, your canvas extension color, make it white. Fortunately, mine is white already, but you can always change it with the drop down. You can even use a color picker if you wanted to. But using the drop down gives you all the standard options. And by the way, gray is 50%. So I want it to be white. I want to extend it. Here is the actual size of my label. It's basically 4 1/4 by 5 7/8. Now, when you go to extend the background or the canvas in Photoshop, you have basically some options down here under the anchor section. Right now, there is a dot in the center of a grid, and that dot signifies that when you extend the size of the canvas, it's going to extend it in all directions. Now you can click in any part of that grid and change how the image is going to extend. So for example, here it's going to extend from the bottom left, go up and out, but not down and back. Here it's going to extend up and out, but not back. 9 times out of 10, you probably want to extend it equally all the way around. And I want to extend it by, I don't know, I'm going to say at least a 1/2 inch all the way around. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go, you know what, I'm just going to go 5 inches wide and 6 1/2 inches high. If I don't like it, I can undo it and go back. So now when I click the button, the OK, it's going to extend it in all directions and add a white background behind it. And again, if you don't like it, undo it, go back, readjust your settings. Does that make sense? Now, one of the reasons I like solid backgrounds is it allows us to use what's called the Magic Wand tool. Magic Wand tool in Photoshop is awesome. It will allow you to select a pixel, a range of pixels, or a threshold of pixels that have similar values or similar color. So the Magic Wand tool is 4th tool from the top. It may not be the tool you have selected up there. If you left click and hold, it'll give you the options. You've got quick selection or Magic Wand. Magic Wand is the way to go. Now, by default, let me fix my tolerance. By default, you've got the sample size set for point sample. That means whatever sample you happen, or whatever point or pixel you happen to hit with the wand, it's going to select that. And that's what I want. And the tolerance is going to be 32. That means 32 steps away from white, or whatever color that pixel is that I pick, 32 steps in either direction. It'll pick similar pixel ranges. You want it to be anti-aliasing so you don't get stair-stepping. You want it to be contiguous, which means you want it to be continuous all the way around. We've only got one layer, so we don't need to sample all layers. And now all I'm going to do is left-click once in the white area, and you can see that it runs a selection around the outside of my image and around the label itself. Yes? Say that again? You want to leave it on. Anti-aliasing on, that's just so you don't get jagged around the edge. That's all anti-aliasing means, is it's going to try to smooth out your edge or your curve. All right, so what I'm going to do is zoom in and see what that looks like. So Command plus minus zooms in. Space bar will let me pan. And actually, that's not too bad of a selection. Now, if I zoom in pretty far, you can see that it is a little craggly, a little jagged, but from a distance, it looks pretty good. And remember, we're going to be about 10 feet away from the camera, so chances are you're really not going to see the edge too much. Make sense so far? All right, so what have I actually selected? The background right here, right? I have not selected the label. Now, if I make an alpha channel with the current selection that I have, it's going to give me opposite results of what I want. So I'm going to go over to channels, which down here in the bottom right, next to layers, you'll see I've got RGB and then a combo RGB layer. Nice thing about channels down at the bottom is you've got a trash can. That means you can remove a channel if you create a channel you don't like. You've got a blank brand new channel, and you've got an option next to it, which is a white rectangle with a dark circle that will make a channel based on your selection. And the good news is it always tries to make an alpha channel based on your selection. So whatever you have selected, I'm going to click on that option. Whatever I have selected, it thinks I want to keep. So I have the background selected, right? So down here in my alpha icon, my background is white and my label is black. Now, in an alpha channel, or when I go to use that in the presence channel in the Pixar surface, what's it going to do? Which color is kept, which color is removed?
White's kept.
White's kept, black is removed, so this is going to give you the opposite. It's going to keep my background, but get rid of the label. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is select that alpha channel I just made and delete it. I still have my background selected, thanks to Photoshop, kind of realizing that I probably want to keep something selected until I tell it otherwise. Unlike Maya, where you click on something and everything's deselected. All right, so here, what I want to do is reverse my selection. Very simple. Up in one of the main menus called Select, go to the drop down, and it is the fourth command, Shift Command I, will inverse or invert your selection. So I select inverse. Now, just the label is selected. So now I can go back into my channels. Go down to my Create channel from Selection. Click on it. And now, the icon shows that my background is black and my label shape is white. That is exactly what I want for an alpha channel. Now I can always verify this anytime just by clicking on the alpha and displaying it.
Mine's right.
That's because you have everything else selected. Just select the alpha channel.
Still right.
Because you have everything else selected. Yeah, turn that stuff off. See, that's because your alpha's off. Turn your alpha on. There you go. All right, does that make sense? Question? All right, so again, this way of creating an alpha channel will give you an unusual shape that's usable for a label. I mean, yes, you can use a rectangle label, you can use a square label, but if you get a chance, it's always kind of fun to see, what kind of shapes you can get. Because artistically, it's a lot more interesting to look at than just a rectangle. All right, so what I want to do here is save this as, I'm going to go File, Save As, format that I want, yes?
Are there other ways and techniques to create alpha, or is this the only way at it?
It's pretty much the main way you're going to do it. If you're in Substance and you're painting, you can get an alpha channel in there automatically. It's just you have to use a fill layer, and then you use masks, and you mask the shape that you don't want to have be transparent and fill it with something else. It's sort of the same technique, but this will allow you to take stuff off the internet and make alphas from it. Generally, you would do it in Photoshop rather than Painter because this is an image editing tool and this is kind of what it does. Whereas Painter, it's used to you going on a 3D shape and painting all that stuff in 3D. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, there are other techniques to do. Some people like to use masks. Create a mask, create several layers, do it manually. I prefer to use just the alpha channel because it allows me to embed the color and the alpha in one file. Then I can bring that over and just separate it out in RenderMan. When I go into the hypershade, I can just go out alpha, plug that right into presence, plug in the out color right into the diffuse color, and I got 2 for 1. So I just like to try and be as efficient as possible. Now, if you're doing it for a game, chances are your game materials are going to handle things sort of similarly, although the process might be a little different. But you're going to have somewhere you're going to plug in a transparency map or an alpha map or something. And somewhere you're going to plug into your base color. It's going to be your color. Some will handle 32-bit images, and some you have to break them out in separate files. Depends on workflow. All right, so what I'm going to do is, the format that I want is going to be a targa. And you want to make sure, under the format, that alpha channel is selected. If you don't do that, you're not going to get your 32 bits, you're not going to get the alpha channel, and it won't work. So right now I'm going to save it to the desktop until I throw it into my project folder. So I'm going to hit save. What do I want here for the targa options? 32, right. If you do 24, you're only going to get RGB. It's going to automatically chop off the alpha channel. So 32, that's RGBA, A for alpha. Now, something that I didn't do that I usually like to do is add the word alpha to my targa. I forgot that. Why? Because if I give this to somebody, they'll know, oh, this is a diffuse map or a color map, and it's got an alpha channel in it. Anything you can do to help remind you or somebody else you're working with or passing files on to is always going to help. All right, so I'm going to put alpha in here real quick. Notice I'm going to open the two of these up. Just going to select the two of them, open them in the Mac Preview program, and you can see the difference. So here's the original JPEG. It's got a white background. Now the Mac Preview program's kind of got that gray looking semi-transparent background. That's because it doesn't really handle alphas that well. Just kind of makes them gray and figures you know what you're doing, you'll do something with it later on. But that tells me my alpha channel is working. Right, so let's tackle the other label here. And students commonly get this kind of label, usually edge-to-edge color. Right, so down here I'm going to click and see what my size is. So it's 600 pixels. It's about 8 3/8 by 6 3/8 almost. So right now, I really don't have anything to select. My label goes edge to edge. I can't make an alpha because I have no border or edge or extra canvas around the outside. So again, this is a case where you need to extend the canvas. So I'm going to go image, canvas size, my width. I do want my anchor to be in the middle again. I want it to extend in all directions. I'm just going to bump it up to 9 inches wide by 7 inches high. Click OK. And there we go. So now I've got a bit of a border. Now I've got a little bit of a green border around it. Let me see what that looks like. And actually that's not too bad. The one thing that will do is give me a nice edge for my magic wand to be able to select. So again, magic wand, I'm going to select the new area that I just created, and I had white set as my canvas background. So I'm going to left click in there, select, zoom in, let's go take a look. Yep, just as I thought, it's pretty clean around the edges. Now, if you find on your label that you're selecting the background but it's going too far into the label, what you need to do is turn down your tolerance. Cut it in half. Try to select it again. See if it still gets too much. If it still gets too much, cut it in half. If you absolutely have a lot of super close pixels, whites, really close off-whites, you can change your tolerance to 1, and it will just select the pixel that is in your background, which we just made, which is pure white. But for this sort of works okay. Plus, don't forget, we got anti-aliasing selected, so it sort of smooths out the jagged edges. Now, again, if I try to make this into an alpha channel, what's going to happen? All right, so if I click Save Selection as Channel, you can see that my label is transparent, my background is kept. Don't want that. Right, so I'm going to delete that. Let's go back to Layers. How do I reverse my selection? I forget, I got amnesia. Inverse, where's that at?
Select.
Okay, under Select, Inverse. Now I flipped everything to be the label. So let's go to Channels again. Click on the Save Selection as Channel. And now my background is black. My label shape is white. It's totally usable. And again, File, Save As. I'm going to save it as a targa. And this file name is ridiculously long. So I'm going to chop off some French stuff here. Just put an underscore and put alpha. Make sure alpha channels is selected. Make sure targa is your format. Click save. Targa options. Keep it at 32. If you don't, you will not have an alpha channel. All right, so here are my two labels. Here's the one that goes edge to edge. Extended the canvas, made an alpha channel. It's got the gray background around it. This should work fine. So now what I want to do is make sure these files go where?
Source images. What is that?
Yep, source images in your project folder. That part's super important or everything goes all to hell. All right, so here's my project 7. Here's my source images. I got a bunch of garbage in there because I'm going to start throwing textures on. So I'm just going to take all my wine labels and throw them in. So every month I go in and do this, and there are different labels pretty much every time. There we go. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to fire up Maya. Set my project. I'm going to go into the exterior scene, because that's where the wine bottle is. I'm going to show you guys, I think I showed you the other day where the label is, but we didn't unhide it because we weren't using anything on it yet. All right, so it looks like everything's fired up. Set project. That's an 8. All right, so exterior, here we go. Right, so there's my wine bottle. No label. What I want to do is I'm going to open up the outliner, go into my scene folder, into my group, find the wine bottle, another wine bottle, piece of geometry, and underneath the actual poly wine bottle, there is the label that is hidden. It is grayed out. When something is hidden and you want to unhide, Shift H will unhide. Control H hides. selecting the geometry in the outliner and doing Shift H will unhide it. You can also throw it on a display layer. All right, so here is my label. Pops in right here on the bottle. Now, it's probably going to have the default material assigned to it, which is Pixar Surface 1. Shift H. You have to select it in the outliner and do Shift H. And it won't show up gray in the outliner. It'll show up just like all the others. Did it work? All right, so I'm going to assign brand new Pixar Surface to this just because I don't want to have it confused with Pixar Surface assigned to everything else. All right, so this is wine label. All right, so where do we start? Let's start by putting in the diffuse, the color, the base. So under diffuse, color, click the checker button. What do I want to use here to put on the label? File. So I want to select on the left side. Notice I can kind of pare down all the choices I have just by saying I want 2D textures. So now that chopped off about 3/4 of what I don't need. Now I can select File. Left click on File. Gives me a file node. There's nothing in it right now. So in the file attributes, image name, click the folder icon. That will allow me to bring in my label. So here's my raw JPEG. I can see in the Maya preview it's got the white background. The one under it is the one I did in Photoshop. Notice that it shows Photoshop, or actually Maya knows how to treat an alpha channel. It knows it's supposed to be transparent. So it doesn't read it. So this is exactly what my label should look like. Now I can click open. And let me hit 6 on the keyboard. There we go. All right, looks great. All done, right? So whenever you bring something in, if the image does not fill up the 0 to 1 space or the geometry, there's a feature that's set in the Place 2D texture, the thing that drives the UVs called Wrap U and Wrap V. That allows it to copy itself across the surface so it fills it up. We don't necessarily want that. Why? We only want one label. You don't want, bits and pieces of a label thrown all over the place. Plus, I really don't need a label behind it. So, what I want is to find out where that Place 2D is. How can I find it? Hypershade, yes. Open the Hypershade, going to look at my materials across the top here, find my wine label, and graph that network. So to the left of my label is the Place 2D texture. Going to click on that, go into the attributes. I want to turn off Wrap U and Wrap V. Now I've got just a single solitary label. Going to see what that looks like from the camera. Not too bad. Now the one thing in the directions we have is, for the wine label, we must be able to see the wine bottle on all 4 sides. That shows you how to use the opacity map, the presence control. Right? So I could scale this up a little bit bigger. And if I need to adjust my scale, I wouldn't do that in the Place 2D. What I would want to do is go into, you're not going to like this, the UV editor. So I'm going to select my label. And I know they say your UV shouldn't be outside the 0 to 1 space, but if you're not doing a collage of your object, collage means you've got your parts, your UV parts all broken apart, and you place them around the 0 to 1 space to optimize it. If you're not doing a collage texture, nobody really cares. But for games, it does absolutely matter. But if you're under the gun and you're just doing the rendering to get it out, don't take the time, if you don't have it, to play around. Getting the UVs in the space, that means you have to make your label smaller.
So don't do it unless you're in the gaming industry.
Well, no, there are times when you have to do it in film also, depending on your pipeline. I'm not going to say never, because as soon as you say that, there's always an exception. Right, so if I want to make this label bigger, basically I can do what? I can shrink my UVs and it makes the label much bigger. Make the UVs bigger, the label gets smaller. So I want to make sure when I'm looking at it that basically I can see the label on all four sides. I'm also going to look at my reference, which is basically my label by itself. Oh, and if you've got Photoshop running, don't do what I just did and keep it running. Quit out. Photoshop and Maya hate each other. What a surprise. Right, so what I want to look at is the height of my label and can kind of compare it to what's in Maya. Looking at the viewport, looks like it is a little bit squashed in the top. So to fix that, I can just scale it up in one direction. Just a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do is do a quick viewport render, because this is just purely to see if my label is showing up correctly. So my label hasn't made it yet. You can see I got the RenderMan blue, white, and tan background. So when that happens, yes? What's that? Do you have the geometry selected? what you want to do is, I would assign this material into a, it shouldn't have the phantom Lambert. The Lambert's what's displaying, not the Lambert. And that's what's confusing about having the Lambert as well. Just that material. Should be okay. Actually, you know, you wouldn't have to if you did change the system. You know, motion rendering, everything's there, that's fine. But it makes it a lot easier when you can work with it. All right. So let me stop my viewport render, kick it off again. My texture should be there by now. RenderMan should have built my TEX file. There we go. All right, so there's my label. Small, mighty, blurry. Now, to get my background to be removed, let me stop my IPR, go back into the hypershade. I want to take my alpha channel that we made, and in the hypershade with my network graph, my wine label, I take the out alpha output noodle just by clicking on that green ball next to out alpha, dragging down the connection noodle, and the very bottom attribute is called presence. Connect those two together, re-render, and your label should be just the shape of the cutout we made. Now it went from cheap bottle of wine you put in a paper bag and drink out of to something you display. Cheap wine. Alright, so there is my Cabernet label. And actually what I'm going to do is let me do a quick IPR from the render cam, because now I'm going to bring in the other label I made, the rectangle label, and kind of do the same thing. Put it on another Maya material.
The grid.
What?
The grid.
Yeah. Oh, right. We give you the texture.
That's the label on the grid.
That would be fun. What do you do? All right, so you also want to do some research. Find out what kind of label. Is the label completely matte? Is it diffuse? Does it have a little reflectivity, a little bit of a sheen on it? So that's going to be edge color, tiny bit of face color, some roughness. Most wine labels usually are kind of glossy. They're printed on glossy material. All right, so now I'm going to take a look at the other label we made. All right, here it is. So I'm going to assign a different, there we go. I'm going to assign a different Pixar surface to it just so I can compare the two. It's going to be wine label 2. Going to do the same procedure. It's going to get plugged into my diffuse color with a file. What's that? You can, especially if it interferes with your scene. Depending on the color palette, how dark it is in the front. Also, make sure that it's in Res 3 mode. You know, you hit 1, 2, 3 on the keyboard to smooth stuff out. Just make sure it's in 3. Sometimes they inadvertently get changed. All right, so got too many labels. How do I get rid of those too many labels? So wine label 2. It's got multiple labels. What do I do to get rid of them? Not for this.
Oh, you can also use
What's that?
You can also use
Yeah, where though?
in the hypershade menu on the web.
All right, hypershades.
Place 2D texture.
Place 2D texture. There we go. Wrap U, wrap V. There we go. Beautiful. Now it's a little stretched. It is supposed to be kind of a rectangle label, a little bit wider than it is higher. This is the opposite. So for this, I need to do what? So what do I want to do to change the shape of my label? There's the way it should look, and it's kind of stretched and distorted in the wrong direction. Anybody out there? Yes? UV editor, I like that. Sounds good to me. UV editor, open it up, close my eyes and hide. Because I hate UVs. No. All right, so now let's see if we can't adjust the UVs so it makes our image look a little better. Alright, let's see what that looks like. Looks like I need to adjust it a little bit more. All right, let's do a quick render, see what it looks like. All right, so my texture hasn't gotten in there yet. Let's stop, give it a second, start up again. All right, there is my label. Now I want to remove any unwanted portion of my label. Right, so I got single label in there, it's working. What do I need to do to get rid of the unwanted part of the label? Yeah. Yep, alpha to presence. In the hypershade, graph your network, your file node, out alpha, click on the green circle next to it, bring the connection noodle down to presence, make your connection, and you should be golden. You should be able to IPR render, or render region, or viewport render. There we go. So I got a little bit of an edge around the side of the bottle. All right, questions? Yes.
In the hypershade on my line label, my subsurface, there's no nodes.
Is everything collapsed? Is it real small? All right. So let's talk about projections and layering because they kind of go hand in hand. All right, so presence maps. File map for pretty much everything you've done, we've been using texture maps. Right? Left click, create a file node, it creates a place 2D texture with UV information. Projection mapping allows us to take a 2D texture and position it in 3D space. Advantages are being able to move it around in X, Y, Z rather than just conforming to U and V space. Now, let's see. All right, back door where we've got the label that says alarm bell will sound when doors open. Now, that would be a pretty good candidate for projection map. Why? Because it would allow us to place this sticker anywhere we want on this door. If the same material were used on the frame, we could actually take this label as a projection in 3D and position it over here, as long as it had the same material. So that allows us to get rid of the confines of just sliding stuff around in 2D, which is kind of what we're doing. So, same thing for the fire extinguishers. These would probably be done the same way we did the lights. Because you'd want to remove any background and let your base material underneath show through. That wouldn't be a projection, because you would do that just as is. But if we had that alarm sticker on the wall here, this kind of, I guess it's a beam, a support beam in the center of the room, kind of gets in the way of the wall, but it's the same material all the way around. You take that sticker, position it here, position it here, position it here. We could put it even between these two if we wanted to. That's the beauty of having something we can move around. Decals, stickers, labels, pretty much all the same thing. Now, in order to be able to put something on an object as a projection, you do not left click on file, you right click. And that brings up this little contextual menu in the hypershape. You right click, choose create as projection, and instead of getting just a file node in a place 2D, you also get a projection and a place 3D, and these control the 2D. So think of the logo as people, passengers, right? This is kind of the luggage that goes with the passengers. All right, this is basically your vehicle. So instead of being in a car that's just 2D, this is a helicopter. This goes in 3D. It goes up, it goes down, it goes side to side. Right? This is the drivetrain. Right? So the projection node controls the place 2D and the logo. This moves everything around, but this is the engine that drives this. This place 3D allows you to move stuff around in X, Y, Z. So you get 4 nodes instead of 2. All right, so what I'm going to do to kind of demonstrate this is, I've got my project set already. Let me save my scene. I'm going to bring up a new scene and create just a polyplane. This is real simple because you'll be able to do this in the viewport without even rendering. So I'm going to assign a Pixar surface to my plane. There we go. Now, for my demo purposes, I am going to download and use the AAA logo. I'm also going to download the SAL logo. So there's the SAL logo right here. Here's the AAA logo right here. So I'm going to drop the two of those into my project folder. That way I can use them as real-world examples of something we're going to use as a projection. Right, so I want to play around with the projection. What I want to do is plug it into something that's going to be primary visibility. That's going to be my diffuse color. So on the Pixar surface, I just assigned to my plane diffuse color, click the checker button. 2D texture, instead of left clicking on file, I want to right click. When I right click on file, I get the option to add to favorites, create texture, which I don't want, create a stencil. I want projection. All right, so remember, you're going to have to do this in your interior scene or your exterior scene. So create as projection. I'm going to go into the hypershade. Let's see what I got. Here's my Pixar surface. I'm going to right click on it and graph network. There's my file node. It's plugged into a projection. My projection's got to place 3D. My file node's got to place 2D. Where does the madness stop? Well, first thing you want to do is plug your file into the file node. That is your logo right here. So in the file attributes, let's pull in the AAA logo first. Click OK. Going to hit 6 on the keyboard, and lovely, I get music staff. So what happens is when you first get a projection, it is a planar projection. It is a flat sticker projection. And like anything Maya that you create by default, where does everything by default go in Maya? Center of the world, right? Drops right in at the 0, 0 space on your grid. And here it is right here. Looks almost like an area light or a rectangle light. So I'm going to translate this up out of the ground. Like a Pixar rectangle light or an area light, it's got a little pointer in the middle. That tells me which side of my projection it's going to be projecting. It is a projector. The reason I know it's not an area light or a rectangle light is it's got a diamond in the lower left corner. That tells me it's a projection node. What I want to do is rotate this so it's aimed down at my surface. Now, when I select my projector, notice I get my place 3D. All right, so I'm just going to make this so it's 90 degrees, projecting straight down. And now I have many, many logos. It looks like a contact sheet of the same logo. It's like evil minions. Nice thing about it is I can move these around. All without going into my Place 2D texture. Now, I do have too many of them. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of all the extras. Anybody got an idea where I could do that at? Yep, That's exactly where it would be. So the place 2D that's attached to my file node still has control over how many are on the surface, the coverage of them. I'm going to turn off wrap U and wrap V. Now I've only got a single one. So now I can move this around where I want. Too small, I can scale it up. Shrink it down. Position it wherever I want. All right, does that make sense? Questions? All right? That was sort of a half question. And
I'm just lost by making a projection.
About what?
I'm lost.
With what?
Making a projection.
Did you right click on the word file and create as projection?
Yes.
And did you graph your network?
I can't find the network.
In your hypershade?
Mm-hmm.
It's your material. You have to right click and graph it.
I know.
You should only have one Pixar surface in there. You find it? All right. All fine and well. This is a simple shape. It is a flat plane, a wall. What happens when we have something like a cube? All right, so what I'm going to do is create another polyprimitive. This time, a cube. Pull it up off the ground a little. Scale it. Pull it out of the way. And by the way, I can slide this right under. Boop, boop. Got to make noises when you do it. If you're not making noises, you're not having fun. All right, so I'm going to assign a separate Pixar surface to my box. Pixar surface, that's going to be boxy. Ooh, that's Bixie. No, I don't want that one. Boxy. There we go. Boxy and Planey. All right. So for my next trick, I'm going to use the SAL logo. And what I want to do is graph my network for my boxy material. Diffuse, color, checker button. To get a projection, I'm going to select 2D textures, right click on file, create as projection. There's my new network. Select file and bring in my SAL logo. There we go. SAL. Many SALs all over the place. Now notice, since I created another projection, it dropped it in at the center of the world. I can select it, pull it out, move it in, and there it is. Oh, look at that. On the other side, I get backwards SALs. It's projecting right through the surface. Yes, exactly.
Just out of curiosity, do you have multiple projection screens or just one?
On the same object?
Yeah.
Because right now I got multiple projections, but they're on different objects. Yes, you can, but that requires layering, which we haven't gotten to yet. Which we will. All right, so here, SAL, what I can do is kind of swing it around to the side, rotate it. There we go. So now it's just projecting everywhere. Now, again, too many SAL logos. If I want to cut that down, Hypershade, place 2D texture for your file node, turn off wrap U, wrap V. There we go. So I can rotate this around, do whatever I want, scale it. So again, projection, I can move it around wherever I want it. All right, I'm going to do one more, this time a cylinder. And I want to show you some different types of projectors. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, kind of scale it up. There we go. Going to assign another Pixar surface to it. Going to create another projection. That's Cylander. Right, so again, diffuse color, checker button. Place 2D, right click on file, create as projection. Now I've got a blank projector in there. I'm going to go into my Hypershade, graph my new network. Select my file because I need to put an image in the file. And let's take the AAA logo again. All right, let me do that again because all of a sudden it didn't. There we go. Didn't give me multiple labels. It should give me multiple labels. There we go. Good. All right. So don't forget, turn off wrap U, wrap V. My display got all wacky. There we go. Yeesh. There we go. My computer's freaking out. So expect to crash any moment. All right, turn off wrap U, turn off wrap V. So I have a single projection here. Now, it looks all right. Scale it up a little. Not too bad. What shape is my cylinder? Trick question. It's a cylinder. What shape is my projector? It's a flat plane. Wouldn't it be nice if I had another option other than a flat plane? I do. Put away that checkbook. Put away that credit card. Not yet. Select your projector or your projection node in the hypershade. In the attributes for your projection, projector type by default is planar. You have many options here. I'm going to select cylindrical. So now, notice that it does not affect my object until my cylindrical shape actually comes basically in contact with it. So now it will wrap around accurately because it is a cylinder as well. Also, notice that when I use my cylindrical projection, it does not project through to the back now. That's kind of solved the problem that I had of stuff going through my object. So for instance, here's the SAL logo sitting on the top of the box. Let's swing it around. So that goes all the way through, but with my projector changed to a cylinder, it maps it out a little bit better. And you can scale that projector just like you would anything. All right, does that make sense? Any questions about that part? All right, so the question always comes up, what if I want to have two projections, or I've got a texture on my object already, and I want to put a projection or a sticker or a decal on top of it? All right, similar to some of you have decal stickers on the back of your maps. You've got brushed aluminum there, you've got kind of a brushed pattern, a rough pattern, and you've got multiple stickers. on it. To do that, you need to be able to have layering. And that leads us to the next topic. Layering in Maya, using what is called a layered texture node. Now, layering in Photoshop is vertical. Layering in Painter is vertical, right? Top layer sits at the top, bottom layer sits at the bottom. You've got an eye icon to turn layering off and on for visibility. You've got blend mode, you've got opacity, you've got fill. In Maya, Maya's layered texture works like Photoshop except it fell down. Think of it as sideways. So, the top is now the very left node. The bottom is anything to the right of it. Now, in Photoshop, you want to move layer order around. What do?
You click on the layer and move it.
Yeah, left click the button, move it around. Can you do that in Maya? No. Maya is not that simple. Maya, you have to middle mouse click, which is why you need a mouse. Trackpad is easy. So you need a mouse. You need to move it around. You got to middle mouse click, drag it left, drag it right. It'll reorder itself. In Photoshop, if you want to make a new layer, what do? You click the new layer icon, right? In Maya, we don't have that. All you have to do is click anywhere in this blank area, and it will create another node, a blank layer. If you want to delete a layer in Photoshop, what do? Trash icon, you can also select it and delete it, right? Hit the delete key on your keyboard. Can't do that in Maya. You have to click on this little close box underneath of the layer. Trouble is, if you miss that button, guess what happens? You create more layers. So let's go in and look at this mythical beast. All right, so I'm in my hyper shade. And layer texture is kind of the hermit of nodes. On the left side under create, if you go down 2D, 3D, environment, other textures, that's where the layer texture lives. If you click on it, it gives you a single solitary node that drops into the node editor. Notice there is no transform information. That means there's no place 2D, there's no place 3D. It is just a container. Its job is for you to plug stuff into, that's it. It allows you to layer stuff, that's its only job. So if I want to create a new layer, I just click anywhere here in the blank area. I want to delete a layer, I simply click at the bottom, delete it. Like I said, if you miss, you get really PO'd and you start clicking and you create more of them, and then eventually Maya will crash. So you got to kind of be careful when you're deleting them. They are here to test your patience. By default, you will get this disgusting lime green color fill to warn you, hey, if you don't put anything in me, this is what you're going to get. Barf green. Now, multiple layers are managed simply by selecting them, and the attributes underneath become active. So right now, I've got my second layer selected. That means my color, my alpha, my blend mode, my visibility, my alpha's luminance, this information is associated with that layer. If I select another layer, that information is associated with that other layer. So to make this easy, I'm just going to give all my layers different colors. Just going to select them, go into the color picker. All right, so each layer I select, that information becomes active. If I want to move a layer around, middle mouse click, drag it left or right. That reorders my layer. If I want to hide a layer, select it, turn visibility off. So each layer will cover up the other layer by itself. That kind of makes sense. Like I said, it is compared to modern layering now in Photoshop and Painter and a couple other programs. It's a little antiquated, but still functional. All right, so in order to make layers actually functional, we have to use what are called blend modes. Blend modes allow us to have layers filtered together, have certain things come through a lower layer to an upper layer so they blend together. The common blend modes that we use are called add, multiply, and once in a while we do what's called an over. But to understand how these work, we need to do some very simple basic math. Don't be frightened. If you can do addition or multiplication, very simple multiplication, very simple addition, you're good to go. Yes, I know you didn't sign up for math. But this is good stuff. This is actually useful. So, first off, we need to identify what value is associated with black and white. Value meaning what number? What number is black? 0. That is correct. All right, so 0. What color is white? 1. So black is 0, white is 1. I'm going to throw those numbers into the beginning of all my equations here. So 0, 1, 0, 1. Now, in order for blending to work, you need to have something else other than 0 to 1. So we're going to assign a random color. This could actually be a texture. This is a placeholder that we're going to use to figure out what we need to do to solve a couple of problems. So, somebody give me an arbitrary number.
4, 10.
So I heard 4 first. We'll use 4. Could be any number. We could be 4, 6, 10. There you go. There's all your numbers. That equals a texture. That equals any random color. All right, just a placeholder. So now we need to assign that number into our equation. That's going to be our second number, integer. There we go. So, the reason we're doing this is because, if you notice, the one wine label that I had, the Cabernet Sauvignon, the one with the nice shape on it, the background of that label is what color? White. Lots of logos, lots of files you find off the internet are going to have white background. White is probably the most common. It's very simple, it's very neutral. You just take something, slap it on a white background, the colors are easily seen. What if you want to get rid of that background but not make an alpha channel out of it, not have to use a presence channel, and you want to do it in a layering system. So we have to figure out which blend mode, either add or multiply, will give us the result we want. Right, so kind of help us along here. Here's our AAA logo. So customer gives us this. They said, we want the white background removed. We want this put on an object, a thermos, computer, whatever it is. We want this to be a decal on there, but we don't want the white background. So which blend mode would we use to remove the white background? Add or multiply? All right, well, let's go back up and do some math. First off, if our logo, which is 4610, had a black background, so 0 plus 4610, what's our number going to be here at the end? Our sum. Yep, 4610. 4610. All right. If our logo had a white background, white is 1. 1 plus 4610 equals, yep, 4611. That doesn't work. Now, our logo has a white background. So far, none of these is working. Multiply. Black is equal to 0. So if you multiply 0 times 4610, what do you get? 0. If we have a white background behind our logo, and we multiply it, 1 times 4610 is 4610. Why we do this? Because we're looking for the result that doesn't change our texture or our number. So if our logo has a black background, we can use add to remove the black. If our logo has a white background, we can use multiply to remove it, and that will give us just our number, our texture, our color. Simple addition, simple multiplication. Right? That's actually the math behind figuring out whether you need a black or a white, an add or a multiply. So, in the case of our white AAA logo background, which blend mode will we use to get rid of it? Say it again.
Multiply.
Multiply, exactly. Because it's white. Multiply it out, gone. So the customer gives us black background. They want the white paint to be on there. What blend mode would we use? Add, yep. Add would get rid of it. All right, let's see this in action. First off, in order for this to work, we need to have a couple layers. One layer is going to be our background. The other layer is going to be our projection, our logo, our decal. All right, so what I'm going to do is I've got 3 separate Pixar surface materials. That gives me a bunch of stuff to do. First, I'm going to delete this demo layer texture that I've got. Now, a lot of times this will happen. You'll be working on a scene and you've got a texture. Say, for example, the outside table, the exterior scene. You've got a wood texture on your table. Your boss comes along and goes, great, texture looks great, but the customer wants a logo or they want a decal. They want it to look like somebody either did it in marker or carved it out with a pen or a bread knife or some other object. They carved their initials into it. So you've already got a texture on it. Now you have to add a layer texture to it, and you have to add a projection to it. So you've already got a network. How do you put a layered texture in the middle of something? All right, so what I'm going to do is start with the plane first. Very simple. Now, here, notice I've already got something plugged into it. Got a projection. I could break the connection, put in my layer texture, add back in my projection. I run the risk of forgetting that I broke the connection, regraphing my network, it disappears, I panic, I forget where it is, and I throw my computer. That would never happen, I know. So, there is another way to do it. It's a little involved, but this is usually what I like to call after the fact. You've already done work and then somebody says, oh, and by the way, you have to do this. So, yeah. So, first thing you want to do is, got my network, going to do, let's graph the plane. There we go. What I want to do is put a layer texture in before my projection. So, layer textures are under the Create section inside your Hypershade. Create, Maya, other textures, layer textures. Click on it. Like I said, it is not connected to anything. So, what I want to do is take my projection and place it inside my layer texture. The easiest way to do that is to have your attributes for the layer texture visible and the node in your Hypershade visible at the same time. What I'm going to do is middle mouse click and hold projection, turns into a green circle with a plus. I'm going to drag it over to my attribute editor. Notice that my layer texture attributes kind of lights up, and release it. Now I've dropped it in. Is my layer connection, or is my layer texture connected to my material at this point? No, it's not. So what I want to do is take the out color of my layer texture, take the connection noodle and connect it to my diffuse color. So now my projection goes through the layer texture into my material. All I've done is stick a layer texture between my material and my texture. The layer texture is just there as a container. Now at this point, notice that the green is covering up my sticker, my logo. What do I have to do to fix that?
Move your texture in front.
Yep. I need to change my layer order. So take my projection, and I want to put it in front of my color background. There we go. Now, my projection is covering up my background. Let's give that another color. Somebody pick another color.
Green or
What is it?
purple.
Purple? Purpley lavender. All right. Now, if I want to remove the white background, this is where blend modes come in. So I select my projection. What color do I want to remove from the background? White. So what is my blend mode? All right, so add is my blend mode. Let's see. That didn't remove the white background. When in doubt, what's the other one? You got a 50-50 chance. There you go. Now, here's the problem. Notice that where I don't have the white logo or the white background, I've got gray. And when I change it to multiply, which will get rid of the white, I got my purple background here, but it's really dark and dingy all around it. That's because this gray background needs to be changed to match the background of my logo, the white. But where is this gray coming from? Anybody got an idea? It's not the Pixar surface, I'll give you that, because we've got the layer texture plugged into the Pixar diffuse color. No, this is the shader right here.
Could it maybe be the projection?
Good thought. Could be projection. But
Maybe it's because we're missing a node?
no, we're not missing a node. It's actually not the projection, but the file node itself. If you go into the file node and scroll towards the bottom, there's something called color balance. And in color balance, there is a default color that will display when your image does not cover the entire surface. That default color is gray. So what we need to do is make this default color match the background that we've got in our logo, which is what? What's the background of our logo? White. So here's why. Let me go back to my layered texture and put on my blend mode of multiply. Select my file node, my layered, or not my layered texture, but my AAA logo default color. I want to make it white. Now it blends in. If I make it black, it just cuts it out. Questions? Make sense? Let's do the cylindrical shape. Because we're going to be doing the AAA logo projected onto the thermos.
This kind of very off for me. In what situations would you want to use the subtractor?
Good question. Let's do that. Not subtract, add.
Huh?
We're not going to use subtract, we're going to use add. Multiply and add are the two most commonly used blend modes. Now, just because I said that doesn't mean you can't experiment. So for example, go back here to layer texture. All right, so none means that my logo and the default color are covering everything. All right, over is really just when you've got an alpha channel. We don't have an alpha channel. In, it's gone. Out, it's gone. Add simply removed the black and let the background show through. Remember, add will remove 0. All right, subtract, it flipped it around the opposite way. It inverted our white, made it black, also inverted our logo color. Multiply. That gets rid of the white background, keeps the black logo. Difference. Takes the white background and the kind of lavendery color and averages them together. What makes up the difference of it? Lighten, darken, not really of use to us. Multiply is the one we want. All right, let's take our SAL logo. I was going to do the cylinder, but let's do the box. So I'm going to graph my box network, graph boxy here. And same thing, I need to put a layer texture in. Layer textures live where? Yep, other textures, click on it once. Creates a blank or empty layer texture node. Right, so this needs to go between my projection and my material. Easiest way that I've found is make sure that your layer texture attributes are visible. Middle mouse click and hold the projection. Your projection selection now turns to a green circle with a white plus. Drag it over to your layer texture attributes. It will light up and you drop it into place. Next thing you want to do is make sure you have the right layering order. But before you do that, you have to go, well, wait a minute. I just dropped it in there. I should be seeing the top layer of green. My box is not green. Oh, I forgot to connect up my layer texture to my material. So in the hypershade, take your out color of your layer texture, drop it into the diffuse color of your material. Now it's correct. Now you can change the order of your layer.
Whenever we're working with textures, we plug in the textures into the color area of each layer and then go to the, whatever the name of those, stamp node and add the color to that one. Right?
Wait, say that again?
So say if we need to put in like a wood grain texture, we'd plug it into the layer editor, and then we'd also plug it into the logo for the default color and color balance. We're putting down a stamp on the.
Well, don't get that color balance confused with plug-in textures or layers in. Color balance is used to simply make the background of your file the same color as the actual file itself. So for instance, notice that I've got a white background behind my SAL logo. That represents the size of my file, right? But that does not cover the entire cylinder or entire cube. That's the default color. So your default color needs to be the same as the background of your logo. Now, what I'm going to do here in this case is I'm going to flip-flop or invert my logo. So I'm going to take my SAL logo, go down under Effects, and invert it. So now it's black. So now, if I want to remove a black background, what blend mode would I use? Add. So if I go back to my layer texture, select my top layer, change it to add, takes care of that, but I still have this. it's really bright back there. So this is where you have to kind of figure out, let me go back and turn this back to none. So I want the background of my cube now to match the background of my logo. That's going to be under my file node again. Remember, I inverted it, so my default color now has to be what color?
Black.
Black, exactly. So I got a little bit of a display issue there with viewport right there. But now I can change my blend mode to add. So now my logo is white, my background shows through, and I can make this any color I want.
Yeah, I get it.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So this background would be the same if I had a file plugged into it. Say, for example, I plugged in, this time I'm not going to use a projection because I want to map a texture to everything on here. All right, so I'm just going to grab, I've got a wood texture. Let's see what that looks like assigned to it. There we go. So now I've got a wood texture and I've got my logo. All right, good question, no? Any others? No? Oh, okay. Yes?
How would you go about adding a font map? Oh, yeah. A font map to it.
The same way you would if you didn't have layering. Same way we did when we did the brick wall the other day. Bump maps go into the globals part of your material. You click on the bump checker button there, and then you have to make sure you go in and use a bump 2D, and then in the bump value, that's where you plug in your file.
So it's definitely the same thing as that?
You could use a projection for a bump. But you would have to do, generally for bump maps, you want them assigned to the entire surface.
So it wouldn't work for...
You could make it work, but it would be the same thing, except your bump map would be black and white, and you could move your projection around. So for example, let's see. Let me take my AAA logo and select the ground plane. All right, I want to go down under globals. And say, for example, I want to have my AAA logo over here so it looks like somebody stamped it into the ground. So for bump, checker button, I need to go to utilities, 2D bump, bump value right here. Click on that. This is where you would use a projection. So I would go File, right click, create as projection. In my file node, I would bring in my AAA logo. Right here. There's my projection. I'm not going to see anything. Remember, with a projection, you can't see anything until you render it. It's not like a normal map where it's visible in real time. So, Let's do a quick viewport render, see if that even works. All right, so I do have bumps here. But there are way many of them. You see them? So how do I get rid of all those bumps?
You want to go to the place to do extras.
Yep, the place 2D. So what I need to do also is clean up my work area down here. So I'm just going to regraph my plane. There we go. So there's my bump. Place 2D. Turn off wrap U, wrap V. Now I've only got one.
Are you just going to rub it together?
Well, I could if I want that to happen. If I want that to line up, what I need to do is, remember what we had to do the other day?
Yeah.
Yep, so our original is the diffuse color. So I want to take my place 2D, hold command, middle mouse click on that stacking icon, drag it down to my AAA logo in the bump. Now it's connected. Is that the only thing I have to do? No. What I have to do is also get my place 3D that's driving my projection here to drive the projection that we're using for the bump. Does that make sense? So I do the same thing. Command, middle mouse click, drag it down to my projection. Ah, this one's going to be a little different. Look at all that stuff. So, that looks really confusing. So here's my output from my place 3D to my projection. So, this is going to be a little confusing. You want to make sure that you take your world inverse matrix and connect it to your placement matrix. At this point, it might be a little much for you to do, but what that will do is line them both up now. So wherever I move my AAA logo, generally, though, if you've got a bump you're using as a projection, you're generally not going to line it up unless you've got a texture. Usually you're using it for a bang or a dent in the wall or a scrape or, just something that's specific in one place. Make sense? So that's a little convoluted for you guys at this point. That's how you do it if you need to, but I would say your projections are going to be minimal. They're going to be just to I got a dent here, I got a scrape here, I got a sticker here, a decal. Make sense? Keep it simple for this project. All right. It's a good time to take a break. Anybody got any questions before we go on break? All right, when we come back, what I'm going to do is we'll go into the interior. I'll show you how to put a projection onto the thermos. We're also going to do the table in the exterior too.